Sometime, if you're in church and the sermon is boring, which means, of course, that someone other than me is preaching, one thing you might do to keep yourself occupied and still be thinking about the important things that bring you here is to count how many crosses you see from where you sit or stand. They're all over this room. And if you look at the center window up front, the biggest element of the design, bigger than anything else in the entire room, is the cross in the front window. You can see it right there behind the cross that's on the altar. Let's go take a look at some of the other design elements that are in this window as we think about Jesus being crucified. When you get close up, you can see a rooster, a reminder of the rooster that crowed when Peter, for the third time, denied Jesus. And you can see a ladder that was needed to take his body down from the cross, and leaning through the ladder is a long stick, and on the end of it a sponge, because while he was on the cross, a soldier held up a sponge full of vinegar to him. Around the center of the cross you see a crown of thorns, such as the soldiers put on his head when they made fun of him and beat him. And there's a cross on the cover of the font where we started this whole series. The cross is a central symbol of our faith because what happened on the cross is central to what we believe God used in order to bring us closer to himself. On the cross, Jesus reconciled the world to God. And how we understand that goes through all sorts of ways. People speak of, sometimes people speak of it as an atoning sacrifice, that because humans sin, that we deserve punishment. And Jesus, who did not deserve punishment because he didn't sin, therefore by dying on the cross was able to accept our punishment for us. God, in that sense, taking it on the chin himself for us, satisfying not some sort of desire for revenge on God's part, but completing the cycle of justice and filling it out with mercy. That's one way that it can be understood. In another way, we think of the consequences of sin. And that is to cut ourselves off from God and from our deepest self, which is the image of God. What is hell? It's to be eternally alone, cut off from God. Sin involves us saying, God, leave me alone. I'm going to do it my way. And eternity with God saying, okay, you don't want me around? You don't need me around. You're on your own. For eternity? On the cross, Jesus called out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he experienced what it is to take the consequences of sin, even though he did not deserve it. And there's a part in the Psalms, a verse that says, even if I make my bed in Sheol, the land of the dead in the Hebrew scriptures, even if I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. In this way of understanding the cross, that terrible, terrible death became a doorway through which Jesus could enter even into the absolute abandonment of all people through sin, and find the ones and reach out to them, which is, when I say the ones, I mean all of us, and bring us back to God by grace and by God's grace alone, and in no way that we could ever do for ourselves. Cut off from God, God finds us even through the doors of death. There are many ways to understand and to think about the cross, the death of Christ. And they're all central to the faith. I don't think that any one way of thinking about it completely captures everything that went on there. I think a whole lot more went on there than the human mind is capable of comprehending. Crucifixion was considered by the Jews and by the Romans the most shameful kind of execution there could be. Jesus didn't steer away from it, but accepted it freely for us. The book of Philippians says that we should let this mind be in ourselves, which was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself. And being found in human form, he was obedient even to death, even death on a cross. And therefore God has highly exalted him and given him a name above all names. This is central to Christian faith. One problem I have with a lot of quote-unquote modern church design is that often they don't have a cross front and center. Not just the churches that look from the outside like they're a dentist's office or a strip mall or a department store. That part I can get over. But if you don't have the cross as a reminder in front of you, then you forget. But if it's there, then it's a reminder of Jesus being here. And not only here, but everywhere, even in the very depths. Jesus compared his approaching death to the whale swallowing Jonah and carrying him down, and eventually him coming back in a way that nobody would have ever expected. There's a lot of comedy in that story. But in the story of the crucifixion, there's not comedy. There's joy. In a way where joy and sorrow meet, kind of at the intersection of two lines going in opposite directions. That's where you find Jesus. Or should I say, where he finds us. Oh boy. There's a lot more to it. But let's leave it at that for now. And I'll see you tomorrow.